Hello, yes, it's me, Paul from Mode 7. I am back again. It's been 2 months. The first part of that was due to GDC and things getting really busy around that time. And then the second reason for that huge gap was that I've been working a lot on the story for the game. And I wanted to kind of go into a hole and not really talk about that as I was doing it. However, now we've made quite a lot of progress in that period, and I want to show you some of it and talk to you about it as well. So stay tuned. Right, the first thing I'm going to show you is the venture system. Now, you still have incursions happening in the city, and you know what those are. We've talked about those before. But ventures is a system that basically allows factions to do a huge variety of different things and then have those things feed back into their overall success. This is very exciting, and it kind of fuels the meat of the non-story game. So here's our first venture, and this is all random. I haven't planned any of this. Guest, who are the hacker faction, are transporting some secure data. Now, ventures range from stuff like this, which is ultra mundane, all the way through to kind of quite dramatic things that can change buildings in the city and allow the faction to progress and so on. So we wanted to create this kind of baseline level of activity. So Guest are doing that. What I can do is call them up. So I'm going to call Brianna Bartleby, who's the leader of Guest. She's just doing her intro, which is fine. And then she says, we're currently consolidating some data via our offline network. Sometimes you just can't trust the shape. So the shape is kind of the in-game internet. And again, this is a very light one, but you can do this for every venture. So everything that a faction can do, you can call them up and find out exactly what they're doing. Now, something that I should mention at this point. Wow, safeguard blockading the airport. That's quite a big deal. Something to mention is, if I find the district map, all of these different districts in the city fund you. So here is New Quarteca, a name that you might recognize from the first game. And if a lot of ventures happen there, they might find one or two of them particularly annoying and call you up and say, hey, we really need you to stop this venture. We're fed up of safeguard blockading the airport, for example, and you'll have to go in and stop them. And you can interact with any single one of these ventures as a mission. That part isn't quite in yet, so I can't show it to you today. But you can see that there's quite a lot of different things that can go on. So I'll just keep playing the game a bit more, and then we'll see how many happen. Blue Sunlight, who are the religious faction, are protesting at a shopping mall. That one might have some interesting flavor text. I wrote all of this text in an enormous rush to get it all in, and I have to do some work to reconcile it. So here's Denizen Valor from Blue Sunlight. We're currently protesting against distraction culture and the lack of direction in our society. Without focus, we have no chance of reaching the landscape, and many functions will be drowned in complexity. So they are mounting this public protest, and that's exactly the kind of thing that a district may not like. So this is working really nicely. One thing to mention here is the EPL system, as Ian has called it. EPL is basically a value that every faction has, and that value is increased by successful ventures and decreased by failing ventures. It's kind of a measure of their economic power, their popularity with their base, and their ability to influence things. And it also will feed back into their military might. So we don't show that, it's a hidden stat, but here you can see their military power. And also you're still able to look up various bits of info about them. But now we have this huge system of all these factions interacting and doing things in the city that can directly affect you via districts. It can also affect your services. So you now pay for different things like ammunition, vehicle, fuel, satellite services, and so on. Each service has a hub building associated with it. And if a faction goes there and takes over the hub, that service can get more expensive. Other ventures can have impact on services as well. So that's another thing that you're going to have to manage. So between your district funding, your services, keeping the factions in check. If they get too many relics, they'll build up and up and up and get more and more power. And dealing with incursions, there are a lot of things for the player to be doing, which is exactly what we wanted at the outset. So it's amazing to have that working. Now, as I may have mentioned, we don't have interacting with these ventures happening just yet. We need to kind of configure the generators for those and sort them out. Yes, Diamond Brothers, the banking faction, they're manipulating the stock market. Now, generally, these descriptors are quite neutral, and then you find out sort of what they're doing from talking to them. So I'll just do one more call and call them up and see what that venture is. We're currently attempting to correct some of the erroneous financial practices we've observed at the City Stock Exchange. So they're going to frame it like that. You're going to get a neutral sort of application of it there at the top of the screen. And then if you call another faction who might absolutely hate the venture, they'll give you their impression of it as well. And something that I really wanted was this idea of different actions being construed differently by the different groups. And you'll have to kind of pick through the language a bit to figure out what you think about it. So these are all happening, and as I said, you still have the incursions, and the incursions are where some of the big main story missions happen, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, I'm not going to show you too much of this, nor am I going to explain the context of this so it can remain spoiler-free. But here is an example of one of the missions that we've done. So this is later in the game, and you have to defend these civilians who are going to stay in this room and then eventually move somewhere else. So it's quite a challenging mission. You have support from the faction whose building it is, so you are interacting with those factions in the story as well. And here are some enemies moving in. Now, because they're not aware of us, we can watch them and see their plan, and we're going to have to defend and set up here. There isn't any deployment in this mission. There aren't any of the fog zones that we showed before. This is just an example of one that uses these bigger buildings and is kind of much more complicated mission than in Frozen Synapse 1, but is a bit closer to that Frozen Synapse 1 style of, okay, now I have a really interesting challenge that I have to deal with immediately. We felt that the story is a really good place for this. We can set up some dramatic situations, and then you're kind of tasked with extricating yourself from said situations. So that's what this is. So all your feedback was really useful on those longer, kind of more progressive missions that have buildings to unlock and so on. And I'll show you one of those in a minute. But this is just a much more straight up mission that's going to get you into some of that meaty gameplay quickly. Okay, here's an example of a completely different style of mission that is a bit similar to some of the ones that we showed earlier. So in this mission, I need to find a hacker who is in one of these buildings and then take them into this zone here. And essentially what you're going to be told in the mission briefing is that you can find different things in these buildings. So I'm not going to spoil too much of it now. I'm going to try and go in and get this hacker out. There are units patrolling in the lot as well. We can see their plans if we test. But that's just a pistol, so I'm just going to go barreling in here. And we still have the thing of you can use long turns to move through the level. So for those of you who may not know what that is, that's when the turn ends at the end of your longest plan. So if I made a plan to walk all the way over here, my turn would end when that unit reached that point. So I'm just going to zoom my units in there really quickly. Something we're working on at the moment is smoothing all of this between turn stuff. We're trying to figure out if we do need to have that big screen come up with, and we'll have a nice loading bar and so on if we do. Hopefully some art if we have time to get that done. So I'm just going to move in here. In fact, what I will do is I will just long turns it in to show you that. Now these buildings are locked, and you can still aim through the windows if you want to do that when they're unlocked. But while they're locked, you can't really do anything. So we'll just do another turn just to show you a little bit more of what this level's going to be like. We've really managed to get through the stuff, improve all the pacing, and make these levels nice and tight. They have a lot of different little surprises in them. I think I'm probably going to get killed by that pistol. No, terrible. Okay, so we open this building and our hacker is here, and we now have control of them. We can move them out. There's a friendly unit there guarding them, and also there's a pistol unit sort of coming in that we need to rescue them from. So again, different things happening in these different buildings. This is how we're making use of these larger, more complex levels, and it's really nice variety. So you contrast this with the immediate situation ones, and you've got a recipe for some interesting gameplay variety. To round this off, I'm going to discuss the story briefly. So you might know some bits and pieces of the story that I've talked about before. The city has been rebuilt after the events of Frozen Synapse 1. There is a force making incursions into it called Sonata, and we're not really sure of the nature of that. And there are all of these various factions within the city who have militarized and gained power. So the way the story works is you are working for the council, who are trying to keep the city together. There's something of a kind of awkward compromise. They're trying to maintain basically sort of liberal democratic values while all of these factions are vying for power around them, trying to manipulate and use the council, or alternately kind of condemning it and trying to turn the population against it. So they're stuck in that situation, and you are brought in effectively as a sort of strategic mercenary to work for them to keep the balance in the city and defend against the incursions. And what's going to happen is, as you go through the story, the different factions are going to come in and help you deal with the incursion force, but they're going to do it in different ways. They're going to bring their own opinions, and they're going to clash with each other and talk to the mostly to the head of the council, who is your boss, about their opinions of things and how things are going in the city. So you're going to meet other characters that come into your team, and they're going to relate differently to those approaches as well. What I'm trying to do here is create a narrative that's going to give you a lot more insight into the other factions as you encounter them later on, and into the overall situation, so that it can sit alongside all of these freeform things you're going to be doing in the city, and also speak to some of the differences in the factions' politics and the differences in their outlook. I really wanted to do something which had characters coming in and kind of having these debates. It's interesting that people kind of mention Ghost in the Shell as a touchstone for the first game. I think there's probably more of that influence in this one. So if you like wordy debates about things, then that's going to be happening to some extent. I've tried to keep it punchy enough that you can get the gist of what's happening, and you may not need to read absolutely everything. There's quite a lot of dialogue which is optional. Characters will call you up and talk to you about things. So it's not going to be ploughing through loads and loads of stuff to get to the point, but there is going to be some more in-depth dialogue, some more in-depth discussion in there. And I hope that's going to frame it in a way that different people are going to be able to pass it. I know that some people are really into the lore and they want to go through everything and read everything, and some people really just want to get to the mission description quickly, and hopefully, like in FS1, the game will facilitate that. There will be clear, concise instructions for what you're doing. There'll be a couple of lines of dialogue that just set it up and frame it if you just generally want to follow along. So that's my ambition with it. I hope that's the kind of thing that's going to interest everyone, and we'll see where it goes when you start to experience it. I wish I could talk about it a bit more fully without spoiling it, but that is quite challenging at this point. So we'll just have to see how it goes. As I work on some more stuff with it, there might be an opportunity to do some more discussion. If you have specific questions that are non-spoilery that you want to ask me about, then do so. Best way to do that is in the comments or on Twitter. I'm Mode7Games, and hopefully the next video will come soon, and I'll be able to give you a bit more of an insight into our day-to-day working again, because I was enjoying doing that before. But thanks once again. If you come back to watch this video, I hugely appreciate it. Please do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you next time.